The story begins with a harrowing premonition of a shattered future, where Prince Felix stands before Lady Ophelia in a cold, sterile room and declares the termination of their engagement. His expression is devoid of warmth as he announces his resolve to marry another woman, Alicia, leaving Ophelia to process the sudden destruction of her social standing and personal future. The scene shifts to a torrential downpour where Ophelia, clad in a voluminous, somber dress adorned with dark roses, stands isolated in the rain. She gazes from the shadows at a distant, sunlit archway where Felix and Alicia stand close together, radiating an aura of intimacy that Ophelia can no longer access. This bleak vision contrasts violently with Ophelia's internal recollections of a time when she and Felix, despite being bound by a political marriage arranged by their parents, shared a genuine and blissful love. She traces the fracture in their relationship back to the moment they turned 16 and entered the academy, wondering if retracing her steps could reveal where the path diverged. The catalyst for this emotional schism was the arrival of a humble honor student who captured the prince's attention. Ophelia recalls painful memories of Felix rejecting her invitations, prioritizing lunch with the new girl over their established routines. When Ophelia suggested they coordinate their attire for an upcoming soirée, Felix dismissed the idea, claiming it was tiresome to always match and suggesting they dress differently for once. The indignities compounded as the soirée approached. When Ophelia requested his escort, Felix declined, citing a vague difficulty in picking her up that day. She attempted to remind him that the event coincided with his birthday, a day she wished to celebrate with him, but he brushed her aside, leaving her to feign a smile and claim his absence was no bother. That moment of forced composure brought her only fleeting relief, masking the sting of betrayal as she watched him clasp hands with the other girl and drift further away. The memory transitions to the night of the ball itself, where Ophelia stood unaccompanied amidst a sea of whispering aristocrats. The gossipers barely lowered their voices, feigning pity for the woman who once commanded admiration but now stood abandoned. Ophelia's humiliation deepened as she observed the girl wearing a dress gifted by Felix, a dress that perfectly complemented his own outfit, signaling to the entire room where his affections truly lay. The sheer misery of the scene struck Ophelia with emotions she had never experienced, a foreign and overwhelming despair that shattered her composure. Suddenly, the perspective snaps to modern-day Japan, revealing that this tragic sequence of events is merely the prologue of an otome game being played by a passionate young woman. Tears stream down the player's face as she weeps for Ophelia, furious that the crown prince would callously discard his fiancée for a new love interest. She seethes with indignation, questioning the morality of a heroine who pursues an engaged man. Overcome with sympathy for the villainess, the player types a frantic feedback message to the developers, demanding they create a route where Ophelia can be saved. She laments her inability to change the outcome as the player character and hits send, desperate to put her money where her mouth is to alter the game's cruel script. The narrative vault returns to the fantasy world, where the young noblewoman Ophelia stands before a mirror, her maid Karen praising her beauty. Karen teases that Ophelia will be the center of attention at the entrance ceremony, but Ophelia dismisses the flattery, bracing herself for the gears of fate that are set to turn on this significant day. Her solemnity stems from a revelation that occurred 9 years prior, when she was just 7 years old. At a family gathering, Ophelia's father announced her engagement to Crown Prince Felix. The mere mention of the name, Felix, acted as a violent trigger, sending a shockwave through her mind. While her parents discussed her future status as queen, Ophelia clutched her head as memories from a past life surged to the surface. The psychological impact was so severe that she collapsed, throwing the dinner into chaos as servants scrambled for a doctor. In that unconscious state, she fully integrated the memories of her past life as a Japanese citizen who had obsessively played the romance game, Phrygia. She recalled clearing Felix's route and collecting every CG, realizing with horror that she had reincarnated into the game world not as the heroine, but as Ophelia Laralake, the villainess destined for tragedy. Ophelia analyzes her position within the game's lore, noting that Phrygia is a fantasy romance where the heroine awakens as a shrine maiden to protect the world from the butterflies of the moonless night. As the villainess, Ophelia is merely a supporting character whose fate is tied to the heroine's choices. Standing before her mirror on the day of the entrance ceremony, she reviews the possible endings: happy, bad, friendship, or harem. She grimly notes that if Felix is charmed away, she faces life in confinement or exile. While she jokes to herself that her former commoner spirit could survive banishment, she harbors a deep, genuine desire to marry Felix. This desire is not born of status, but of the kindness the young Felix showed her in the immediate aftermath of her awakening. When the 7-year-old Ophelia was racked with anxiety over her doomed fate, Felix visited her daily, bringing crimson freesias and gently assuaging her fears. His compassion transformed her perception of him from a mere game character to a beloved partner, motivating her to study diligently and beautify herself to become a queen worthy of him. She adopts a defiant motto: even a villainess has the right to obtain happiness. With her resolve hardened, Ophelia departs for the academy, thanking Karen for her assistance. She arrives at the grand auditorium, observing the grace and poise of the students, a mix of nobles and talented commoners. She attempts to psych herself up for the confrontation with destiny, but her composure wavers when a voice calls out to her. It is Felix, introducing himself as Felix Fields to maintain a low profile, though his royal aura is unmistakable. He invites her to sit next to him, and Ophelia's heart pounds as she thanks him, overwhelmed by his physical presence, which far exceeds his digital counterpart. Felix apologizes for not escorting her from the dormitory, explaining that school regulations prohibit guys from entering the premises. He admits that he feels lonely when she addresses him so formally as Prince, and Ophelia's internal vision superimposes floppy dog ears onto him, highlighting his endearing, puppy-like nature. Guilt strikes her as she remembers that the original game's Ophelia bullied the heroine, a fate she is determined to avoid by building a harmonious relationship. However, anxiety creeps in, causing her expression to scrunch up into a grimace as she wonders if Felix's gentle eyes will inevitably turn cold. Felix notices her distress and misinterprets it as nervousness about the ceremony, offering a comforting presence that only makes Ophelia's chest ache with the fear of losing him. Just as the ceremony is about to commence, a cheerful voice interrupts their private moment, asking to take the empty seat beside Ophelia. Ophelia turns to face Alicia, the game's heroine, who beams with a blindingly bright smile that confirms her light attribute. Ophelia introduces herself with practiced politeness, analyzing Alicia as the commoner granted admission due to her rare ability to wield holy magic. Alicia is starstruck upon meeting Felix, who introduces himself with a practiced humility, claiming to be just another student. The interaction takes a surprising turn when Alicia leans in to admire Ophelia's hair, praising its glossiness and beauty. Ophelia is taken aback that the heroine is praising the villainess, but she navigates the social interaction gracefully. Alicia admits she admires long hair because hers is short, and Ophelia reciprocates the compliment, praising the bright, adorable shade of Alicia's hair. Ophelia begins to relax, thinking that perhaps this girl is truly good-natured and that things are going far more smoothly than expected. However, the atmosphere shifts during the facility briefing. Alicia notices a pen that has rolled near Ophelia's feet and retrieves it. She hands it to Ophelia with a smile, saying, "Here you go," but Ophelia freezes as she accepts the object. In her palm lies her favorite pen, snapped cleanly in two. Ophelia stares at the broken instrument in shock, noting that it was in excellent condition just a moment ago. Her mind races with suspicion, wondering if Alicia broke it intentionally or if the fall caused the damage. Despite the ambiguity, Ophelia decides that making a scene would be disastrous. She rationalizes that it must have snapped when it hit the ground and resolves to grit her teeth and bear the loss to maintain the peace. She gloomily accepts the situation, but Felix notices the mishap. Seeing Ophelia with a broken pen, he immediately intervenes, offering his own pen to resolve the inconvenience. "Please take mine if you don't mind," Felix says, extending the writing utensil. In a stunning display of obliviousness, or perhaps calculated audacity, Alicia is the one who accepts the offer. She clutches Felix's pen to her chest, blushing deeply, and exclaims that she will treasure it for the rest of her life. Ophelia watches in disbelief, her internal monologue noting the sheer nerve of the heroine. She observes that Alicia's declaration sounds less like borrowing a tool for notes and more like accepting a permanent gift. As the headmaster offers his congratulations to the new students, Ophelia feels a heavy gloom settle over her. She realizes that despite her best efforts to prepare, the game has begun, and the thorny path she feared is already unfolding beneath her feet. The threshold of destiny, where Lady Ophelia stands before the imposing doors of Class A, the physical manifestation of the game's beginning. She steadies her breathing, acknowledging that this is the first day of school, the precise coordinate in time where the Frisia storyline formally initiates. Beside her, Prince Felix prepares to enter, his demeanor calm, while Ophelia internally notes that despite the earlier encounter with the heroine, the atmosphere has remained surprisingly peaceful. However, the tranquility is a fragile veneer, masking the high-stakes navigation required to survive the villainous route she fears is inevitable. The doors click open, revealing a sunlit sanctuary of academia that immediately captivates Alicia. The heroine's eyes widen in sheer awe as she steps into the room, her internal monologue vibrating with the thrill of a fan who has transcended the screen to inhabit the world she once idolized. She marvels at the lace curtains fluttering in the breeze and the pristine beauty of the desks, confessing that she got carried away by the realization that she is actually a student in the main setting of her favorite game. Alicia openly admits her humble background, stating that given her family's lack of wealth, she never dreamed she would walk these halls. Ophelia observes this display of commoner charm, maintaining a polite exterior as she agrees that she, too, is delighted to be there. The classroom dynamics shift immediately to the strategic deployment of social positioning. Alicia, fueled by the euphoria of living her fantasy, declares her intention to sit by the windows, a classic protagonist choice. Ophelia, engaging in her own tactical maneuvering, expresses relief when Felix chooses the seat directly next to hers. She whispers her hope that campus life will be enjoyable with him by her side, to which Felix responds with a mutual affirmation. However, the sanctity of their couplehood is instantly breached. A heavy thud echoes as Alicia claims the seat on Felix's other side, sandwiching the prince between the villainess and the heroine. Ophelia's heart hammers in her chest, the sound effect, badump, manifesting the shock of this aggressive proximity. She watches, alarmed, as Alicia beams at Felix, cheerfully announcing, "I'll be in your care." Ophelia analyzes the situation with the cold logic of a gamer, wondering if the heroine has already locked onto Felix as her primary target. She rationalizes that perhaps Felix is simply the only viable option available at this early stage, as the other capture targets have not yet appeared. Yet, the heroine's behavior, wedging herself between them and attempting to strike up a conversation during the transit to class, strikes Ophelia as predatory. The tension is momentarily diffused by the arrival of a new player. Ophelia and Felix rise to greet a bespectacled student who approaches the window, Klaus Delacour. Ophelia identifies him instantly as one of the key capture targets, a character in the same year as them who commands respect. Klaus offers a formal greeting to the Highness and expresses his anticipation for the next 3 years. Ophelia returns the pleasantry, addressing him as Lord Klaus. Alicia, undeterred by the noble atmosphere, inserts herself into the interaction. She introduces herself as the honor student, Alicia. Ophelia observes Klaus's reaction, noting that while she had seen him at countless soirees, the sight of him in uniform strikes a particularly cool figure that explains his large fanbase. She recalls his data profile, son of the Prime Minister, a user of water magic, and an expert in defensive systems. Klaus, sharp and informed, realizes immediately who Alicia is. He acknowledges her reputation as the talented individual wielding light magic and takes her hand, expressing a desire to bring the kingdom to greater heights together. Ophelia watches the squeeze of their handshake, realizing that the political machinery is already turning. Klaus has clearly been briefed on the honor student's value. She reflects on the composition of Class A, a stratified environment populated by royalty, the academically gifted nobility, and special cases like Alicia who are exempted from tuition. As Klaus bows and returns to his seat, telling Alicia to call on him if she needs anything, Ophelia notes that the game's assembly of outstanding individuals guarantees a challenging year ahead. She also mentally catalogs that 2 capture targets, upperclassmen, have yet to make their entrance. The narrative then pivots to a moment of supreme audacity. With the introductions over, Alicia turns her full attention back to Felix. She brings up the pen incident from the auditorium, using it as leverage to initiate a lunchtime event. With a bright, disarming smile, she asks, "Shall we have lunch together?" Ophelia jolts physically, stunned by the brazenness of the request. She stares at Alicia, who appears to her not as a sweet girl but as a predator eyeing its prey. Ophelia seethes internally, noting that Alicia knows full well Ophelia is Felix's fiancée, yet she dares to ask him out right in front of her face. Ophelia retreats into her memories of the original game script to predict the outcome. She recalls that in the game, Felix coldly rejects the invitation with the line, "Unfortunately, I already have plans," leaving the heroine to retreat. Ophelia prepares herself to watch the rejection play out, certain that Felix will decline. However, reality fractures the script. Felix responds with a cheerful, "Yeah, for sure." Ophelia freezes, her internal monologue crashing against the deviation. She knows they made no such plans, wondering if it simply slipped her mind. Felix, smooth and inclusive, turns to Ophelia and asks if she has a moment, effectively inviting her into the plan he just improvised. He remarks that it is almost noon and they must be going. Ophelia, still reeling but relieved to be included, agrees. As they walk away, leaving a stunned Alicia behind, Ophelia spies the heroine's smile waver, realizing the event did not go as the game dictated. The couple arrives at a quiet courtyard, a location Ophelia recognizes with a shiver of dread. This specific spot with the bench and the trees is the backdrop for the notorious event where the villainess bullies the heroine on the first day of school. In the original scenario, the villainess would find the heroine eating a humble lunch here and mock it as unpalatable. Ophelia realizes she is meant to play that role, but she has brought no lunchbox to trigger the scene, leading her to hope the event has been averted. She resolves to keep the peace and say nothing cruel. Just as she settles into this resolution, Felix produces a wicker basket. He confesses with a bashful smile that he woke up early and tried his hand at making a lunchbox for the very first time. Ophelia is floored. The prince of the realm has entered the kitchen to cook for her. He opens the basket to reveal a collection of somewhat clumsy-looking wraps and fruits, apologizing that they don't look appetizing. He quickly adds that he had help from the head chef, so the taste is assured. Ophelia gazes at the food, her heart melting. She assures him that the appearance doesn't matter, telling him she is beyond happy just knowing it is homemade. She perceives the warmth radiating from the gesture. He tried his best at something he isn't skilled at solely to make her happy. They sit together on the bench, an image of domestic intimacy. Felix offers her a handkerchief, and Ophelia prepares to savor every last bite of the meal prepared by his hands. The tranquility is shattered by the sound of rapid footsteps. Thud, thud, thud. Ophelia and Felix look up to see Alicia sprinting toward them, panting for breath. The heroine bursts into their private sanctuary, exclaiming, "So the two of you were having lunch over here." Before either can react, Alicia declares, "I made it just as you were about to tuck in, thank goodness," and forcefully inserts herself into the scene. She plops down onto the bench next to Felix, offering a cursory, "Pardon me," as she invades their space. Ophelia stares in disbelief as Alicia produces her own basket, a lunchbox in hand. The villainess reflects on her past life as a player, acknowledging that she often chose heavy-handed options to pursue the romance, but seeing it play out in reality is jarring. She questions if the heroine is being too aggressive, barging in and sitting down without a real invitation. As Alicia opens her basket, Ophelia feels a sinking realization. The lunchtime event, which she thought she had sidestepped, has pursued her with relentless momentum. The game mechanics are forcing the encounter, and Ophelia wonders with dread if the event has truly begun. The tension in the courtyard escalates as the lunchtime event unfolds, with Ophelia caught in a high-stakes psychological battle against the game's script. She keenly observes Alicia's movements, recalling the original dialogue where the villainess would cruelly remark, "There's no way he could possibly eat something prepared by a girl he only just met today," and insinuating that the food might be poisoned. Ophelia knows the script by heart, having watched it play out countless times on her screen. She watches Alicia open her basket, revealing a meticulously packed lunch, and braces herself for the inevitable conflict. However, Ophelia is determined to rewrite the scene. She resolves to never utter those hurtful lines, hoping that by treating the heroine with kindness, she can foster a peaceful relationship. But just as she formulates this plan, the game forces her hand in a way she didn't anticipate. Alicia, seemingly oblivious to the tension, cheerfully remarks on the fine weather and her own packed lunch. Then, with a sudden shift in tone, the heroine delivers a devastating critique of Ophelia's lunchbox. "The bread and salad are fine since all you needed to do was procure them," Alicia says, her eyes narrowing slightly. "But the rolled omelette looks like an attempt by an amateur." Ophelia freezes. Those words strike deep, not because they insult her cooking, but because Alicia has mistakenly assumed Ophelia made the lunch. In reality, it was Prince Felix who poured his heart into that amateur omelette. Alicia, unaware of this crucial detail, continues to twist the knife, adding with a giggle that her own cooking turned out the same way when she first started. She finishes with a nonchalant, "I didn't mean any offense, but the damage is done." Ophelia glances at Felix, whose smile has turned strained. He laughs it off with a polite, "Yeah," remarking that Alicia certainly doesn't mince her words, but Ophelia can see the hurt behind his eyes. Furious on his behalf, Ophelia's internal monologue shifts from pacifism to protective rage. She realizes that while she can endure insults to herself, she cannot sit idly by while the prince is slighted. The lines she swore never to speak suddenly bubble up in her mind, fueled not by villainy but by a desire to defend her fiancé's honor. Lady Alicia, did you really intend to have Prince Felix eat that? Ophelia finds herself saying, echoing the game's script but with a new, righteous context. She continues, delivering the biting remarks about the impropriety of feeding royalty food from a stranger, and even the line about potential poison. As the words leave her mouth, Ophelia watches Alicia tremble head bowed. She wonders if the heroine is seething with anger or on the verge of tears, expecting the standard reaction. But when Alicia looks up, she is smiling. Ophelia is stunned. The heroine's expression is not one of defeat, but of eerie calm, as if she, too, is reciting lines from a script. Ophelia quickly pivots, softening the blow by praising the nutritional value and quality of the ingredients Felix used. She takes a bite of the omelette and declares it divine, emphasizing that the soft-boiled eggs are organic and perfectly seasoned. She turns to Felix, her eyes shining with genuine affection, and delivers the ultimate rebuttal, above all, it was made with love. This declaration seems to shake Alicia, who stammers an apology, claiming it was a slip of the tongue and that she didn't mean to ruin the mood. However, Felix's demeanor has shifted. He looks at Alicia coldly, stating that if she is going to speak without a filter, he would rather she keep her distance. Ophelia watches this unfold with a mix of relief and confusion. The scene has deviated significantly from the game. In the original script, Felix would have rushed to comfort the crying heroine, but here he is defending Ophelia and distancing himself from Alicia. Yet, Alicia doesn't back down. She quickly recovers, insisting she isn't crying, and then plays her trump card, a jar of lemon jelly. You're fond of lemon jelly, aren't you? Alicia asks, presenting the dessert with a knowing smile. Ophelia recognizes this as a critical item from the game. Felix's favorite food is indeed lemon jelly, and in the original route, this offering would win him over. Ophelia watches anxiously, fearing that the script will correct itself. Felix accepts the jar, admitting he doesn't dislike it. But before he can take a bite, Ophelia intervenes. She reveals a jar of her own. Actually, I was hoping to enjoy it with you, Ophelia, Felix says, surprising her by presenting a jar of lemon jelly he made himself. He explains that the head chef made it, and offers her a spoon. Alicia is left holding her jar, stunned. Ophelia realizes that Felix's affection has not been swayed. But Alicia's specific knowledge of Felix's favorite food, a detail not widely known, triggers a suspicion in Ophelia's mind. Could the heroine also be a reincarnated individual? The thought strikes her with the force of a revelation. If Alicia is also playing the game, her aggressive actions and specific knowledge make perfect sense. Ophelia hesitates to confront her, fearing that confirming her suspicions might drive her into a dead end. Instead, she decides to seek answers elsewhere. She excuses herself and heads to the back of the school building, a location known in the world of Frisia for its flower beds. In the game, the blooming freesias serve as an indicator of the capture target's affection levels. Ophelia arrives at the garden and inspects the flowers. She finds that the red freesias, Felix's color, have begun to bloom, confirming that his affection level is rising. However, she notices something else. Amidst the red blossoms, other flowers are peeping out. This discovery sparks a new hope in Ophelia. If she can steer the heroine towards the other capture targets, Liam, Klaus, or Alvin, perhaps everyone can attain happiness. As she contemplates this strategy, a voice interrupts her thoughts. Color me surprised. To think I'd come across someone here. Ophelia turns, realizing that her peaceful investigation is about to be interrupted by another player in this intricate game of love and fate. Liam Frisia, a figure lauded for his ethereal beauty, serves as a priest despite his status as a student. Recognized as a highly esteemed son of God, he possesses a natural affinity for wind magic and excels in the arts of healing magic. Within the narrative of the game, Frisia, he is a capture target known for an elusive smile that has ensnared the hearts of countless fans. Yet, beneath this divine exterior lies a dispassionate disposition masking a tragic backstory, a temperament that shifts into extreme possessiveness once a heroine successfully wins him over. Watching from a concealed vantage point, Ophelia Larralake struggles to contain her reaction to his physical presence. She acknowledges that while Prince Felix remains her favorite, Liam's aesthetic perfection is undeniable, a classic example of a handsome archetype who exudes coolness without effort. Ophelia attempts to justify her lurking as a mere campus walk to familiarize herself with her new surroundings, though she admits her manners are deplorable for spying. In the garden, the scene unfolds as the heroine, Alicia, approaches the stoic priest. Liam, maintaining his distance, politely acknowledges her but questions her purpose, his demeanor suggesting a lack of interest in conversation. Alicia apologizes for the disturbance, and as Liam introduces himself as Liam Frisia, Ophelia observes the interaction with keen interest, noting how quickly his attention seems to wane. He lives up to his reputation for being difficult to engage. Ophelia's mind races as she correlates the physical scene before her, the flower beds, the after-school timing, with her knowledge of the game's events. A jolt of recognition strikes her. This is the precise event where the heroine and Lord Liam first meet. Meanwhile, Alicia, a first-year student, marvels at the secluded flower beds, her heart pounding with the excitement of discovery. The sound of her footsteps echoes against the stone path as she hurries forward. Ophelia, hidden behind a tree, realizes the precariousness of her position, understanding that bumping into the heroine now would disrupt the flow of the event. She recalls a specific line Alicia is meant to say and watches intently, hoping the script plays out as intended. Alicia runs into Liam, and the encounter officially begins. Liam, cool and detached, asks if she knows who he is. Alicia confirms his identity as Lord Liam, introducing herself with a bright, beaming smile characteristic of a protagonist. Ophelia, observing from the shadows, notes that everyone knows him, making the question somewhat rhetorical. Liam's response is curt. He states that she does not need his permission to be there, though Alicia interprets this with overwhelming positivity, expressing her thrill at the encounter. As the conversation progresses, Alicia expresses her adoration for freesias and asks if she might tend to them. Liam deduces she came specifically to water them and grants his passive consent, stating it is fine by him. Alicia thanks him profusely, calling the situation wonderful. Ophelia, listening from behind the tree, feels the memories of the game's dialogue flooding back, confirming that the conversation is aligning perfectly with the original scenario. However, the atmosphere shifts. Liam, with a look of complete disinterest, remarks that he does not particularly care for flowers. He questions Alicia, asking if her interest in the freesia flower stems merely from his last name, creating a tense and awkward silence. Ophelia winces at the friction, noting that while most men might not care for flowers, Liam's coldness is particularly intimidating when he falls silent. She realizes that despite his handsome exterior, his intimidation factor is significant. Liam breaks the silence with a probing question, asking Alicia if she thinks freesias are special. As he speaks, he notes a sensation that the goddess of Frisia is near. Suddenly, a windless phenomenon occurs. A flower sways on its own. Liam's sharp eyes catch the movement, and his gaze intensifies. He looks at Alicia, pondering her identity, while Ophelia notes the heroine's smile, recognizing it as a characteristic trait of a light magic user. In that moment of magical resonance, a miracle manifests. A single freesia blooms instantly before their eyes, unfurling its petals in a pristine shade of white. Alicia gasps, amazed by the sight of a flower blooming instantaneously, comparing its color to Liam's beautiful hair. Ophelia, witnessing this from her hiding spot, is equally astounded, having never seen such a phenomenon in reality despite reading about miracles in books. Liam, observing the flower, admits that the sight is not half bad. Ophelia analyzes the situation frantically. In the game mechanics, the color of the freesias is directly tied to Lord Liam's level of affection. White represents the maximum level of affection. She is stunned that Alicia has managed to breach his defenses so quickly. The Liam she knows from the game is impassive and difficult to capture, usually taking a long time to open his heart. Yet here, in the very first encounter, he has ostensibly reached peak affection. Liam takes his leave abruptly, and Alicia watches him go before departing herself. The garden returns to silence, leaving Ophelia alone with the blooming white flower. She steps out from behind the tree, surveying the scene. The efficiency of the romance path baffles her. She never imagined a white freesia would blossom this early. She contemplates the game's logic, recalling the conditions for freesias to bloom, the seasonal events, and the sequence of events required to reach this stage. It seems the reality she is living in has accelerated the timeline significantly. Deciding it is best not to interfere with this rapid development, Ophelia resolves to return to her dormitory. She turns to leave, intending to let the romance unfold on its own. However, her escape is cut short. A voice stops her in her tracks. Liam stands there, having not actually left the area. He remarks with a piercing gaze, "Quite the eavesdropper, aren't you?" Ophelia's heart hammers against her ribs, shock coursing through her system. She realizes he was aware of her presence the entire time. Flustered, she attempts to regain her composure and offers a formal apology for her indiscretion, bowing her head in shame. She claims she was simply curious. Liam, however, does not let the conversation end there. He asks, with feigned innocence, what exactly she was apologizing for. Panic sets in. Ophelia calculates her options. She cannot admit she was curious about the romantic progress between him and Alicia. Remembering his earlier question to Alicia, she improvises a lie. She forces a smile and claims she was curious about the color of the freesias in bloom. She hopes this excuse, grounded in the immediate context, will be believable enough to satisfy him. Liam's expression remains unreadable. He counters her explanation with a devastating observation. He points out that almost all the flowers in the beds are currently buds. He notes that it should have taken them at least a couple more days to bloom naturally. His gaze narrows as he traps her in her own logic. "Yet, you spoke as if you knew they were going to bloom soon." Ophelia freezes, realizing her knowledge of the future and the game mechanics has led her into a corner from which there is no easy escape. The tense aftermath of the miraculous blooming, where the laws of nature bend to the mechanics of affection levels within the game. Ophelia stands cornered by Liam's sharp interrogation as he points out the inherent contradiction of the situation. The freesias tucked away behind the school building were mere buds only moments ago. He asserts that by all rights, it is unnatural for them to suddenly flourish into full bloom, and his piercing gaze locks onto her as he recalls her earlier comment. He reiterates her suspicious words, noting that she spoke as if she possessed foreknowledge that the flowers were destined to open immediately. Liam concludes that it should have been inconceivable for her to predict such an event, given that the plants clearly displayed no signs of imminent blossoming. Internally, Ophelia acknowledges the impossibility of her position, realizing she cannot possibly confess the truth. She understands the phenomenon solely because she inhabits the world of a game she once played, a reality where biological cycles yield to narrative triggers. However, she calculates that no one would believe such a confession, nor would anyone find joy in learning their existence is reduced to a character in a constructed simulation. Trapped by logic, Ophelia pivots to a facade of innocent wonder. She flashes a bright, disarming smile and claims she is just as surprised as he is, insisting she never thought they would actually bloom. She fabricates a cover story, stating she heard rumors of flower beds in this location and merely came to satisfy her curiosity about what species she might find. To seal the deflection, she invokes a mystical ambiguity, suggesting that only the goddess of Phrygia could possibly know the exact moment a flower decides to bloom, and she seeks his agreement on this spiritual interpretation. Her heart hammers violently against her ribs, the sound deafening in her own ears as she maintains her composure under his scrutiny. Liam offers no immediate verbal response. He simply stares at her, his expression unreadable and intense, stretching the silence into an agonizing eternity. Ophelia feels her blood run cold for a terrible moment, fearing he has seen through her deception. She warns herself to be vigilant, questioning if her performance convinced him or if he merely lost interest in the interrogation. As Liam turns and walks away without further challenge, Ophelia acknowledges that despite his apathy, Lord Liam is surprisingly sharp, a trait that makes him a dangerous variable. Ophelia retreats from the garden, the weight of the encounter leaving her dead beat. Her mind races with a new, disturbing realization. The heroine's ability to predict the event and arrive at the precise moment proves that she, too, is a reincarnated person. She sighs heavily, the burden of this knowledge settling upon her as she accepts that the game's main story has officially commenced. The heroine's behavior confirms she possesses knowledge of how the game unfolds, marking the end of the opening event. Walking through the evening shadows toward the dormitory, Ophelia concludes that getting along with the heroine will be impossible. She characterizes the other girl as a real piece of work, noting how she interrupted their lunch earlier that day. It becomes evident that the heroine intends to pursue Prince Felix aggressively, advancing upon him at breakneck speed. As the designated villainess to this aggressive protagonist, Ophelia accepts that the heroine will naturally view her with wariness. She resolves to give her own future serious thought, understanding that her survival depends on navigating this hostile narrative landscape. Reaching her residence, Ophelia reaffirms her life's motto: even a villainess has the right to obtain happiness. She steels herself against despair, refusing to lose heart as she approaches the door. The heavy door creaks open, and she is immediately enveloped in the warmth of her home. Karen, her loyal maid, greets her with a beaming smile, welcoming her back. Ophelia asks about the entrance ceremony, to which Karen responds with gratitude for the inquiry. Karen promptly takes Ophelia's bag and offers to serve tea, sensing her mistress's fatigue. Ophelia admits the day was predictably exhausting. Karen reveals she had anticipated an earlier return and had already begun preparing a bath. Internally, Ophelia notes the disconnect. Karen cannot possibly understand that Ophelia has been launched into a hard mode far more difficult than she ever imagined, a struggle that goes beyond mere academic tiredness. Karen serves the tea with a clink of china, praising Ophelia for her hard work. Ophelia's eyes light up at the sight of Madeleine's, a small comfort in a stressful day. Karen assumes the entrance ceremony was an eventful affair, a stepping stone towards Ophelia becoming a worthy consort to the crown prince. The maid expresses her deep appreciation for the effort Ophelia put into preparing for the academy, acknowledging the intensity of her dedication. Karen suggests they make an exception for the night, brushing aside the lateness of the hour to focus on relaxation. Karen's face lights up with an idea to melt Ophelia's stress away. She proposes filling the bathtub with rose petals for a lovely aesthetic and offers to give Ophelia a massage while she soaks. Karen psyches herself up for the task, deciding that this is the perfect course of action. Ophelia, however, hesitates, concerned that such elaborate preparations would be a lot of trouble for her maid. Karen dismisses the concern instantly, her expression softening into one of genuine devotion. She declares that nothing brings her greater happiness than seeing her dearest lady well and at ease. Ophelia is touched by this declaration, recognizing Karen as a gentle, constant presence who is always there for her. She thanks Karen, deciding to surrender to the care and allow herself to be pampered, finding solace in this singular relationship amidst the chaos of the game world. As she smiles, the scene shifts to the exterior where a lone flower blooms in the moonlight. The narrative jumps to the academic setting, where the focus shifts to magic. The instructor announces that since it is the first day of lessons, the students will showcase their abilities. The narrator explains the magical laws of the world of Phrygia, where people live and breathe magic, possessing natural affinities for different elements. While there are 7 types of elemental magic, most individuals align with the 4 classical elements: fire, water, earth, and wind. Ophelia glances sideways, noting the extreme rarity of a light magic user appearing. She recalls that in the heroine's case, her power extends even further. She is able to tap into holy magic once she ascends to the role of a shrine maiden of Phrygia. The teacher calls the students forward one at a time to let their magic flow. Prince Felix is the first to step up. Ophelia watches him stride forward, thinking that whether he wears magic class robes or the regular uniform, he always looks cool. She even muses that he likely looks good in the physical education jersey. Felix politely thanks the teacher for having him. At the teacher's signal, Felix unleashes his power. A massive roar of flames erupts, a spectacular display of fire magic that earns him applause and the teacher's validation that he expected nothing less. As Felix returns to the group, Ophelia compliments him, telling him he was magnificent and that his manipulation of the fire was mesmerizing. Felix blushes slightly, humble in his response, stating that his private tutor believes he still has a long way to go, but he is thrilled to receive her compliments. The teacher then calls upon Miss Ophelia Larrelake. Ophelia responds with a gasp and an affirmative, okay. The teacher instructs her to demonstrate her water element using a cup. Ophelia concentrates, but the result is underwhelming. The water merely splashes weakly within the vessel. Internally, she admits that her ability to wield water magic is severely lacking and fears her poor performance is an eyesore. She insists to herself that she really did try her best to fill the cup. The teacher stops her, suggesting she might want to work a little harder, effectively dismissing her effort. Despite the public failure, Felix leans in and whispers to her, thanking her and stating that he likes her water magic. Ophelia thinks to herself that he is incredibly kind, possessing a nature that is completely beyond her. The teacher continues lecturing, explaining that mastery over magic allows one to wield offensive spells and create defensive barriers. Standing amidst the other students with a polite smile, Ophelia grips her hands together and reflects on the dangerous truth she must hide. She acknowledges that she can never reveal her real magic attribute. Following the narrative logic of the world, if the heroine is bathed in light, it follows that the villainess is shrouded in darkness. Ophelia confesses in her thoughts that her true affinity is that of dark magic. She contemplates the stigma surrounding this power. There are practically no dark magic users in existence, leading some to question if the rumors of their existence are even true. Because it is viewed as taboo, those who possess the attribute are better off concealing it to survive. The lore states that humans with an affinity for dark magic can communicate with the villainous butterflies of the moonless night. Ophelia resolves that she just wants to live a peaceful life. Although she was born with such powers, she has absolutely no intention of using them. The atmosphere in the classroom shifts dramatically as Miss Alicia takes the stage. A blinding light erupts, stunning the onlookers. The teacher and students gasp in awe, remarking that while they heard she could command light, witnessing it firsthand is a remarkable sight. The brilliance is unlike anything they have ever seen before. Alicia stands at the center of the acclaim, humble yet confident. The teacher praises her, calling the display amazing and noting that light magic is particularly effective against the butterflies of the moonless night. Alicia responds with a smile, stating that the professor flatters her, but she vows to work hard for the sake of the kingdom. The class erupts into a clamor of admiration, calling her the honor student, comparing her to a goddess, and hailing her as the country's rising star and beacon of hope. Ophelia watches the adoration from the sidelines, the gap between the celebrated light and her hidden dark wider than ever. Ophelia stands before the imposing architecture of the academy as the afternoon light signals the end of the school day. Her expression hardens with resolve as she declares it is time to brush up on her magic skills. She heads toward the magic training grounds, determined to assist Prince Felix to the best of her capacity as a water mage. Her solitude is interrupted by a voice inquiring if she is practicing alone. Ophelia turns to face Lord Alvin Cresswell, the third son of a count and a known capture target within the game. Alvin, a practitioner of earth magic known for blending offensive swordplay with defensive spells, flashes a charming smile. Despite his infamous reputation as a shameless playboy, he graciously offers to lend a hand if she requires assistance. Ophelia stiffens as Alvin places a hand on her shoulder, finding his touch bothersome and his amusement at her situation palpable. He teases her, suggesting she looks like she needs a private tutor and declaring that he cannot leave a damsel in distress in the lurch. Ophelia suppresses her irritation, calculating that building a good relationship with a main character is strategically sound. Acknowledging the limits of solitary practice, she agrees to take him up on his offer. Alvin asks about her plan for the session. Ophelia admits with some embarrassment that her abilities are dismal, so she intends to review basic concepts. Alvin immediately pivots to a practical approach, suggesting they return to basics so he can gauge her water summoning capacity. He produces a borrowed cup and, with a sudden tug on her hand that elicits a startled cry from Ophelia, leads her into position. The lesson begins with Alvin instructing her to focus all her magic into her hands to manifest water. He stands intimately close behind her, his hands enveloping hers around the cup. Ophelia tentatively agrees to try, noting internally that his skill as a teacher is evident. She observes his proximity, realizing why so many girls fall head over heels for him. As they concentrate, Ophelia notices the process is going far smoother than usual. She realizes Lord Alvin is channeling his own magic into her to assist the manifestation. He encourages her, praising her progress, but suddenly notes that her hand is getting warm. The session is abruptly severed by Prince Felix, who strides into the scene and physically blocks Alvin from Ophelia. Felix stares Alvin down, stating firmly that he knows what is happening. Alvin, sensing the tension, raises his hands in a placating gesture, swearing he was merely offering guidance on magic use and not attempting to flirt with the prince's fiancée. Alvin swiftly apologizes and withdraws, self-deprecatingly calling himself petty. Felix immediately pivots to Ophelia, offering to take over her practice session. Ophelia hesitates, concerned about taking up his time when he is so busy, but Felix insists he would be more than happy to help. As Felix invites her to begin, Ophelia glances back to see Alvin waving from a distance, intending to watch over them. She recalls the game's CGs of Alvin winking but pushes the thought aside. Although she feels a pang of guilt for Alvin, she resolves to enjoy this rare alone time with Prince Felix and entrusts herself to his care. Time dissolves into the rhythm of their practice until the sky darkens. Ophelia realizes with a shock that it is already late. She thanks Prince Felix profusely for staying back to teach her, apologizing for losing track of time. Felix dismisses her concern, stating he wanted to do it, but his expression turns grave as he warns her to be careful of the butterflies of the moonless night. Felix explains that in Phrygia, These terrible creatures exist to eat away at hearts and twist minds. He describes them as having the appearance of fairies with ebony hair and charcoal eyes. He warns that contact with their shimmery mist is dangerous. Ophelia reflects on the lore, noting that while one or two are mere common monsters, they become a menace capable of decimating entire villages when they congregate. She acknowledges that within the game's narrative, it is the heroine and the main characters who are destined to vanquish them and save the world. A sudden gasp escapes her as she realizes she has been treating this threat with the levity of a game event. She remembers the spectacular final boss fight where the heroine, as the Shrine Maiden of Phrygia, emerges victorious. However, the reality is far grimmer. This year marks a phenomenon that occurs once in 1,000 years, where the power of darkness reaches its peak. Felix adds that these creatures are prone to appearing on cloudy, foggy nights like this one. Ophelia stares into the gathering gloom, burdened by the knowledge that an inordinate number of these butterflies are approaching. As a reincarnated person, she possesses this unique foresight, shared only potentially by the heroine. She feels helpless, knowing that warning others based on game information would make her seem insane. Frustration gnaws at her. She wants to strategize for national security, yet she is hopelessly inept at magic compared to the heroine's holy blessings. Felix notices her distress and apologizes for frightening her with talk of the monsters. He attempts to reassure her by mentioning that defenses have been bolstered and mercenary troops deployed to the capital and noble districts. He turns to her with a gentle smile, declaring that these measures are for the people's protection and for hers as well. Ophelia is struck by his directness, her face erupting in a blush. She takes deep breaths to steady her racing heart, realizing that Prince Felix caught her completely unawares. Suddenly, the romantic atmosphere is shattered as a dark mist curls around them. Felix instantly commands Ophelia not to leave his side. Ophelia stares into the fog, realizing with horror what is happening. From the darkness, the butterflies of the moonless night materialize, laughing maliciously as they announce they have found humans. A reminiscence of lemon jelly, stepping away from the looming darkness of the main story to a moment of quiet intimacy. The scene opens with a conversation between Prince Felix and his attendant amidst a backdrop of lush foliage. The attendant questions the wisdom of the prince's gift, asking if the recipient might tire of receiving the same flowers every single day. Felix dismisses the concern with a confident, gentle smile, asserting that Lady Ophelia would surely appreciate such beautiful blooms. His attendant concedes the point, though a hum of contemplation lingers in the air. The setting transitions to the interior of a residence where a maid stands at attention, clapping her hands together in a welcoming gesture. She greets Prince Felix with a bright, hospitable expression. Felix enters, exhaling a breath of relief as he takes in the sight of Ophelia standing before him. He notes that she appeared quite unwell during their last encounter and expresses his genuine worry. Ophelia confirms she is present, though Felix probes further, asking if she is still recuperating from her cold. Ophelia, looking slightly flushed but composed, reveals she has prepared a small token of gratitude for him. She acknowledges his steadfast dedication, noting that he has visited her every day without fail. Her heart beats rapidly, the sound echoing in her chest as she presents her gift. Felix, however, has his own offering. He holds out a bouquet of flowers, and Ophelia realizes he has brought them for her once again. She glances at the blooms, overwhelmed by his sheer cuteness and consistency. She exclaims that they are her favorite, asking how he knew. Felix confirms his choice with a simple affirmative, expressing hope that they suit her tastes. Ophelia reciprocates the sentiment, revealing her own preparation, lemon jelly. She admits she is fond of the treat, and Felix's eyes light up as he shares her preference, stating he too enjoys it. The scene shifts to a table where the lemon jelly sits, glistening in the light. Felix decides to help himself to a serving. He tastes it, and a look of delight washes over his features. He praises the flavor, calling it delicious. Internally, he marvels at the reality of their arrangement, scarcely believing that this elegant, refined woman is his future betrothed. He observes her poise, noting that despite being the same age, she exudes a maturity that captivates him. He thinks to himself that she is utterly adorable. Ophelia, noticing his gaze, flusters slightly and dismisses his praise as nothing special. Suddenly, a playful yet bold idea strikes her. She giggles, asking Prince Felix if he would mind terribly if she watched him as he finished eating. Felix stammers, caught off guard by the request. He admits it is somewhat embarrassing, a blush creeping onto his cheeks. He chastises himself internally, thinking that as a gentleman, he should be the one doting on her, yet here he sits, feeling like a maiden under her scrutiny. Attempting to regain his composure and restore his honor, Felix proposes a change of venue. He asks if they might continue their conversation in her room. Ophelia nods in agreement, and Felix adds a tender qualifier, stating that she is special. The weight of the word hangs in the air, charging the moment with significance. As they move to leave, Felix extends his hand, inviting her to take it. Ophelia accepts the gesture, thanking him. However, as she steps forward, her footing betrays her. She stumbles, her body pitching forward. Panic flares in Felix's mind as he fears he has messed up or that she might hate him for his clumsiness, while Ophelia cries out in surprise. The moment stabilizes. Ophelia apologizes, admitting she was too hasty. She confesses she was a little nervous. The tension dissolves into shared amusement. Felix lets out a small laugh, asking if she felt it too. Ophelia chuckles, and the atmosphere softens into one of mutual relief. Now in a more private setting, Ophelia reflects on the flowers. She tells him that she feels calm and at ease whenever she looks at the freesias he gave her. She gestures around the room, showing him that she has decorated the entire space with his gifts. Vases filled with the blooms adorn various surfaces, creating a sanctuary of flowers. Ophelia tells him that it feels almost as if he is right by her side. She stops herself, fearing she has overstepped. She worries that saying such a thing out of the blue might have made him uncomfortable. But Felix, touched by her sentiment, thanks her. He gazes at her with deep affection. Felix's internal monologue reveals the depth of his devotion. He vows that even when they are grown, even when they are ancient and saddled with grandchildren, he will never stop offering her flowers. He is certain she will love that. Returning to the immediate present, Felix extends his hand once more. He reminds Ophelia that they should head over to their next class. As they walk, he notices a flush on her cheeks and asks if she is all right. Ophelia averts her gaze, claiming she is fine. Internally, Felix observes that even now, he still gets flustered when Ophelia acts this endearing. He thinks she looks charming as always. He wonders if he is doing a better job of looking after her now, though he is distracted by how cute she looks today. He suspects she might have already caught on to his feelings, but he remains content in the moment, walking beside her. Indecipherable cries echoed through the murky atmosphere, voices that seemed to claw at the edges of perception, screeching observations about the presence of humans. Ophelia stood amidst the shadows, her mind racing as she processed the legends regarding those with an affinity for dark magic. It appeared the tales held truth. Such individuals possessed the unique capability to communicate with the elusive and dangerous butterflies of the moonless night. She realized with a heavy certainty that she stood as the sole person capable of deciphering the disjointed, screeching parts of their speech. The cries grew more coherent and malevolent, questioning the intruders before screeching a declaration of doom upon the humans standing before them. The darkness surged, manifesting as a swirling vortex of malevolent energy that threatened to consume everything in its path. Ophelia watched the approach of the hostile entities, her body betraying her composure as her voice trembled involuntarily. Before the shadows could bridge the distance, Prince Felix interposed himself between Ophelia and the encroaching danger, his back a sturdy wall against the threat. He issued a firm command for her not to worry, his voice cutting through the chaotic noise with a promise of absolute protection. Felix raised his hand, channeling his magical energy as the air around them crackled with intensifying heat. He incanted the spell, summoning the flame sword, to manifest into reality. He commanded the elemental force to engulf his foes, calling upon the flames to execute his will. A torrent of fire erupted from his command, a blinding wash of light and heat that tore through the darkness. The impact was instantaneous and devastating, the shockwave blasting outward and scattering the malevolent particles into nothingness. As the blinding light of the explosion faded, the dust settled to reveal the aftermath of the single, decisive strike. Ophelia stared wide-eyed at the scene, her breath catching in her throat at the display of raw power that had unfolded before her. Felix turned to her, his expression softening from the mask of battle into one of genuine concern. He expressed relief that she remained unharmed, assuring her that safety had returned. Ophelia, still processing the swift victory, marveled at the fact that he had vanquished the swarm with a mere single blow. Felix probed gently, asking if the encounter had frightened her. Ophelia admitted that while the sudden assault had delivered quite a shock, the certainty that he would keep her safe had anchored her. She acknowledged his presence as the decisive factor that quelled her fear, offering him her formal and heartfelt gratitude. Felix accepted her thanks, but his focus shifted to a more personal request. He asked her to remain by his side, his hand finding hers in the quiet aftermath. Ophelia agreed, a soft affirmation escaping her lips as he squeezed her hand, a gesture that conveyed more than words. Felix's face flushed with a subtle warmth as he held her gaze, vowing to continue protecting her, a promise solidified by the gentle pressure of his hand against hers. The terrifying encounter with the butterflies of the moonless night, she realized, had served as a blessing in disguise. The experience of placing her life in another's hands and witnessing them leap to her defense caused her heart to pound in a rhythm that felt entirely new. The narrative shifted to the bright, mundane reality of the academy the following morning. Ophelia observed the social dynamics of the school with a keen, analytical eye, specifically tracking the movements of Lady Alicia. She watched as Alicia aggressively pursued the capture targets, her actions mirroring a pre-written script. Alicia cornered Lord Klaus, feigning ignorance about an assignment to solicit his help and suggesting they head to the library together, effectively cutting off his route. Ophelia noted the calculated nature of the interaction, observing how Alicia anticipated Klaus's destination before he even arrived. The observation continued as Ophelia watched Alicia lavish praise upon Lord Alvin, celebrating his athletic prowess with exaggerated enthusiasm. Ophelia stood at a distance, analyzing the pattern. Alicia had been especially aggressive lately, her behavior suggesting a systematic approach to each potential suitor. It appeared as though Alicia tracked the capture target's every move, waiting for the precise moment to sink her claws into them, a tactic that Ophelia found both transparent and relentless. Felix's voice broke through her reverie, calling her name and pulling her attention away from Alicia's schemes. Ophelia snapped back to the present, realizing she had spaced out and kept the prince waiting. She stammered a frantic apology, her mind scrambling to realign with the immediate schedule. Felix merely chuckled at her fluster, his demeanor relaxed and unbothered. Ophelia confirmed that their next engagement was music class and began a chaotic search for her textbook, her movements clumsy in her haste. As the classroom emptied around them, leaving them as the sole occupants, the atmosphere shifted into a comfortable silence. Felix reassured her that they still possessed ample time, insisting there was no need to rush their departure. Ophelia gathered her belongings, her thoughts drifting to the stark contrast between the game's mechanics and her current reality. These small, unscripted moments, his patience while waiting for her, the loving smile that warmed his eyes, and his consistent escorting of her, were elements absent from the original game. As they prepared to leave the empty room, she felt these genuine gestures melting her heart far more effectively than any dramatic event. Ophelia peered from behind the stone pillar, her gaze fixing upon the secluded garden where Lord Liam sat on the grass, accompanied by Lady Alicia. She analyzed the scene, deducing that Alicia had perhaps shifted her romantic focus to pursue him instead of her previous targets. Even from this distance and viewing them from behind, Ophelia identified the pair with certainty. She watched them, a silent hope forming that this new pursuit would divert Alicia's attention permanently. Suddenly, Liam shifted, his head turning until his eyes locked directly onto Ophelia's hiding spot. She froze, disbelief washing over her as she recalled Liam's reputation for utter indifference and his lack of interest in others. She questioned if their eyes had truly met, attempting to dismiss the interaction as a trick of her imagination. However, he continued to stare, prompting her to recoil in panic and question why he focused so intently on her. She ducked back behind the masonry, her heart pounding against her ribs. Prince Felix approached from the shadows behind her, noticing her distress. Ophelia, startled by his sudden appearance, pointed out the figures in the distance, identifying them as Priest Liam and Lady Alicia. Felix observed the two, concluding that they were indeed acquainted. He assessed the situation, remarking that Alicia would be late for class at this rate and suggested they intervene to warn her. Ophelia hesitated, her thoughts lingering on the rumor that Liam possessed a cold and impassive nature, yet he had stared so openly. Alicia spotted them, her face brightening instantly as she called out to Prince Felix and Lady Ophelia. She feigned innocence, striking a playful pose and claiming she had completely lost track of time. Ophelia groaned internally at the theatrical performance, while Felix stepped forward to call out to Alicia, prompting Ophelia to cringe behind him. As the group began to move, Ophelia reflected on Felix's character. While she would have chosen to ignore the situation, Felix's upright nature compelled him to ensure no one was left behind. She admitted to herself that this integrity stood as one of the many things she liked about him. Alicia walked alongside them, pouting playfully as she thanked Felix for coming to retrieve her. She insisted that without his intervention, she would have missed her class. Felix brushed off the gratitude, stating they merely happened to be passing by. Back in the garden, Liam stood, announcing his departure as the break concluded. He glanced toward the departing group, advising Alicia, who lingered, that she should return to class as well. Alicia sighed, conceding that it seemed necessary. Felix urged the group to hurry, concerned that further delay would inconvenience their instructor. Alicia expressed relief that they had called her over. Ophelia, however, realized with a jolt that music class was next on their schedule. A sense of dread filled her as she recalled the curriculum. There was to be a test on their singing abilities. Alicia leaned in close, a sickeningly sweet smile on her face as she sought Ophelia's agreement. She remarked on how nerve-wracking it was to sing in front of everyone. Ophelia detected the knowing look in Alicia's eyes and forced a strained agreement, barely managing to suppress her annoyance. Ophelia walked on, frustrated by her inability to escape, aware of her own lack of singing talent. She felt that every time Alicia appeared, the possibility of peaceful days drifted further away like a distant dream. She suspected Alicia aimed to stir up trouble, perhaps fully convinced that Ophelia was her enemy. Her mind, however, drifted back to the garden encounter. She recalled the sensation that Lord Liam had not just looked at her, but had been watching over her the entire time. The realization left her confused, wondering why he would do such a thing. The grandeur of Field's Academy, where a yearly tradition unfolds to celebrate the arrival of the new year. The atmosphere hums with anticipation as the students gather for a party that serves a dual purpose, celebration and supplication. It is here that a hymn is dedicated to the goddess of Phrygia, a solemn prayer invoking her divine blessings upon the gathered assembly. Central to this ritual is the selection of 2 students who will perform the sacred song. Tradition dictates that these 2 are none other than the heroine and the capture target whose affections she has successfully won. The event functions as a public showcase of their relationship, a ceremonial debut intended to garner the approval and admiration of their peers. The gathered crowd watches, whispering that the pair on stage are a perfect match, as applause ripples through the hall. The scene shifts to the recent past, within the confines of a music classroom where Ophelia stands clutching her score, her cheeks flushed with exertion and nerves. She has just completed a singing test, an ordeal that leaves her trembling slightly. As the final notes fade, the instructor declares the singing test concluded. Ophelia exhales, her mind racing with the implications of the upcoming selection. She calculates that if events proceed according to the game's original script, Lady Alicia is destined to be selected as the female representative. A pang of insecurity strikes her as she acknowledges her own lack of musical talent, lamenting that if she could only carry a tune, she might stand a chance, though she quickly dismisses the notion as mere wishful thinking. Prince Felix, standing nearby, turns to her with a gentle smile, his face dusted with a shy blush. He admits that while the performance was a little embarrassing, he is glad she liked it. He thanks Ophelia sincerely. Ophelia, charmed by his demeanor, internally remarks on how cute he appears when embarrassed. She outwardly compliments him, exclaiming that his singing was lovely. Felix returns the sentiment, noting that it has been a long time since he last heard her sing and claiming his ears have been blessed by the sound. The conversation turns to the future as Felix muses on the possibility of them singing together at the New Year's party. He confesses that he is beside himself with excitement at the mere prospect. Ophelia praises him again, calling him a splendid singer. Felix remains humble, stating that he has never even attended a party before, so the idea of attending as a student representative makes him incredibly nervous. He adds that it would be an honor if they were indeed chosen for the role. The tender moment is shattered by the arrival of Lady Alicia, who interjects with a pointed question, asking if Lady Ophelia is aiming for the position by any chance. Alicia's tone drips with feigned innocence as she asserts that Ophelia must be a phenomenal singer. She twists the knife, reasoning that as the young lady of a ducal family, Ophelia would naturally possess a beautiful singing voice that draws praise at social gatherings, implying she surely takes lessons like other noble ladies. Ophelia feels the weight of the insult. She knows Alicia is aware of her terrible singing voice and perceives this as a deliberate attempt to rub salt in the wound. Ophelia struggles with how to respond, wishing she could simply ignore Alicia but knowing she must maintain cordial relations to avoid appearing condescending. Before Ophelia can formulate a defense, Felix steps in. He firmly states that he, for one, likes Ophelia's singing voice. The declaration catches Ophelia off guard, causing her to gasp in surprise. She realizes he likely said it to rescue her from a tight spot, but the gesture flusters her, and she stammers a thank you. Emboldened by his support, she internally resolves to work on improving her singing. Felix's words fill her with happiness, and she reflects that whenever he compliments her, she eventually learns to appreciate those parts of herself. Felix, smiling warmly, adds that he could listen to her sing forever, leaving Ophelia to protest weakly that he flatters her. A few days later, the reality of the script asserts itself. A notice is posted on the school board announcing the chosen representatives to sing at the party: Felix Fields and Alicia. Time accelerates, and before Ophelia knows it, 1 month has flown by. During this period, Lady Alicia's behavior shifts. She begins approaching the capture targets more aggressively than ever before. Ophelia observes from a window as Alicia spends time with Lord Alvin one day and Lord Liam the day before. In the hallway, classmates whisper as they watch Alicia with yet a different guy, commenting that she has returned in full force just when they thought she was letting up after the music class incident. They critique her lack of shame, attributing it to her commoner upbringing. Ophelia, listening in, internally agrees that shameless is an understatement. Seeking solace and information, Ophelia visits the school gardens. She stares at a flower bed marked Freesia. There, she observes flowers blooming in all 4 colors: red, white, purple, and yellow. Although there is currently only one of each, the implication is terrifyingly clear to her. In the game's mechanics, these flowers represent the affection levels of the capture targets. Every time the butterflies are defeated, the target's affections for the heroine automatically rise. This means Alicia does not need to face the villainess head-on to win. Ophelia realizes that with the appearance of the butterflies of the moonless night, everything is proceeding exactly according to the game's plot. She decides she must check these flower beds every day from now on, her heart clenching with anxiety and fear. The scene transitions to a bright morning in Ophelia's dormitory. Sunlight streams in as birds chirp outside. Her maid, Karen, enters to wake her, announcing that breakfast is ready. Ophelia sits at the dining table, picking at her meal, visibly exhausted. She suppresses a yawn, thanking Karen for the food. She admits to herself that she was fretting so much over the game that she had a hard time falling asleep the previous night. Karen notices her mistress's despondent state and tentatively speaks up, noting that Ophelia has been looking rather down recently. Karen offers a listening ear, assuring Ophelia she can always confide in her. Ophelia deflects slightly, claiming she is just stressed about school, but accepts the concern. Karen suggests visiting the library for a change of pace. Ophelia considers the suggestion and agrees, realizing she has been so focused on work, surviving the game, that she completely forgot the school had a library. She admits she hasn't read a good book in ages. Karen beams, describing the library as a vast collection of books perfect for a book lover like Ophelia to unwind and relax in. Karen provides directions: follow the path behind the school building, and it sits right in front of a fountain. Ophelia arrives at the library and is struck by its magnificence. The interior is massive, featuring a high-domed ceiling and towering shelves, second in scale only to the Royal Library. She wanders through the quiet, checkered floor halls, confirming Karen's description of it being peaceful and secluded from prying eyes. She picks up a book, reading a blurb about 2 childhood friends growing up in a small town. She becomes so engrossed in the story that she momentarily forgets her surroundings. Realizing she should find a place to sit, she heads deeper inside where it is less crowded. As she rounds a corner, she freezes. Sitting at a table together are Lady Alicia and Lord Klaus. Ophelia mentally berates herself, screaming internally as she remembers that this library is Lord Klaus's favorite spot. To make matters worse, the source of her sorrows, Alicia, is sitting right beside him. Ophelia attempts to retreat, hoping to pretend she never saw them, but Klaus spots her immediately. He remarks that he didn't expect to see her there. Trapped, Ophelia forces a polite greeting, asking how he is doing. Klaus adjusts his glasses, his gaze drifting to the book in Ophelia's hands. He notes that she is after that book. Ophelia looks at the volume resting on the table between Klaus and Alicia. It is the very book she has been dying to get her hands on, a title she didn't even know the library possessed. Before she can speak, Alicia jumps in, offering the book to Ophelia with a bright smile. Alicia claims she has already finished reading it, so Ophelia can have it. Ophelia accepts it with a blush, thanking her profusely. However, Klaus interjects with a sharp observation. He notes that the Lara Lake territory, Alicia's home, has an abundance of water, which Alicia had cited as her reason for interest. Alicia tries to maintain her facade, agreeing that nobles share a desire to prosper their territories. Klaus cuts through the pretense, revealing that the book is actually a technical manual concerning the technical aspects of water safety and is hardly an interesting read. He exposes that Alicia's claim of enjoying it was likely a fabrication to spend time with him. Ophelia, however, is genuinely fascinated. She opens the book, marveling at the information about water quality making a difference and plants that change color based on that quality. Klaus watches Ophelia read, observing her genuine engagement compared to Alicia's superficiality. He comments that he had heard ridiculous stories, rumors, lately, but seeing Ophelia now, he concludes they were just rumors. He dismisses Alicia's presence mentally, noting she isn't good with books, while finding Ophelia interesting to talk to. He invites Ophelia to stay and read there with him. Ophelia is stunned. According to the game, he should have shooed her away for disrupting his study time. Although tempted, she politely declines, stating her maid is waiting for her. Ophelia leaves the library, her mind whirling. She processes the interaction, noting Klaus mumbled something about rumors. She decides to think about it later because there is something more pressing she needs to check before returning to the dormitory. She returns to the garden and stands before the freesia flower bed. Her eyes widen in horror. The flowers have multiplied. There are now 5 of each color. The realization hits her with the force of a physical blow. This signifies the reverse harem route. In the lore of the world, entering a relationship with all 4 men is a privilege afforded only to the shrine maiden of Frisia. If Alicia is on this path, the fate that awaits the villainess is not merely rejection, but execution. Ophelia stares at the blooms, the terror of her destined end looming over her. A young woman lay sprawled across her bed in a world far removed from magic and nobility, her eyes glued to the screen of a handheld console. She exhaled a breath of disbelief, celebrating the monumental task she had just completed, navigating the game's most difficult route without the aid of spoilers or a walkthrough. The screen displayed a notification confirming she had achieved max favorability for all capture targets. Her excitement mounted as she realized this specific milestone unlocked the elusive reverse harem ending. However, the lore of the game dictated a grim fate for the villainess in this timeline. The narrative text on her screen described how Ophelia, pushed to the brink by the theft of her fiancé, would eventually snap. Driven by madness, the digital Ophelia would use her affinity for dark magic to summon a horde of the butterflies of the moonless night, unleashing them not just upon the academy, but across the entire country. The tragedy would conclude with the heroine and her allies stopping the rampage, resulting in Ophelia's execution for her crimes. The perspective slammed back into the reality of the game world, where the living, breathing Ophelia gripped the fabric of her dress, her mind racing. She violently rejected this pre-written destiny, asserting with absolute resolve that she possessed no intention of controlling the butterflies, nor would she ever use them for her own ends. A shiver raked through her body as she acknowledged a terrifying truth. She could comprehend the indecipherable cries of the monsters. She theorized that their encounters were no accident, but rather the game itself warping reality to force the plot forward. A darker thought took root. Lady Alicia likely knew of this fatal outcome. Ophelia suspected that Alicia wasn't satisfied with merely stealing Prince Felix's heart, she aimed to claim Ophelia's life as well. A surge of foreign, malevolent emotion welled up inside her, feeling unmistakably like the despair of the original Ophelia, but she crushed it down, vowing she would never do anything to hurt Prince Felix. Her senses suddenly flared, detecting a dangerous, otherworldly presence nearby. Identifying it immediately as a butterfly of the moonless night, she sprinted toward the source of the disturbance. She arrived panting at a stone courtyard to find the creature hovering menacingly, noting with alarm that she hadn't visually noticed it at all until she was close. Standing before the beast were Prince Felix and Lady Alicia. Alicia took command of the situation, stepping in front of the prince and instructing him to leave the battle to her. Ophelia, watching from the shadows, recognized the mechanics at play. This was a scripted event designed to raise affection by defeating an enemy. Alicia incanted holy light, summoning a burst of divine energy that obliterated the creature in an instant. As the monster crumbled into dust, Alicia giggled, telling Felix it was her pleasure to assist. Felix thanked her formally, while Klaus burst onto the scene, breathless and panicked, shouting to ask if everyone was all right. The noise of his arrival startled Ophelia, who remained hidden. Klaus noted that most students were incapable of fighting, making Alicia's intervention vital. Alicia played the humble heroine, explaining that she ran into Felix on the way and, since there was only one enemy, she handled it easily. Klaus questioned if she felt the presence too, but Alicia deflected, claiming she merely felt something was off. Klaus praised her incredible strength, suggesting that with such skills, she could obtain any job she desired, perhaps as a civil servant or a member of the shrine. Alicia feigned a lack of interest in fighting but declared she would not stand idly by while the butterflies ran rampant. Ophelia peeked around the trunk of a large tree, analyzing the conversation. She had assumed Alicia's goal was a prestigious career, but Alicia suddenly corrected Klaus, revealing she held a different dream for her future. With a bright smile, Alicia announced she wanted to be the happiest bride in the world. Ophelia watched as Alicia stood framed by the figures of the crown prince and the prime minister's son, realizing that bride, in this context, meant marrying into the highest echelons of royalty or nobility. Internalizing this revelation, Ophelia critiqued the ambition. She knew that to be a consort required elegance, refinement, and a stellar education. More importantly, it demanded a profound love for the country and its people, as well as a genuine love for the partner one served. Ophelia, who had come to cherish this world she once viewed as mere fiction, vowed to protect it with her life. She looked at Alicia with skepticism, wondering if a girl who treated this reality as a game could ever truly handle the weight of the royal family. The stress of the moment triggered a fracture in Ophelia's mind. She staggered, clutching her head as shards of forgotten memories pierced through her consciousness. The scene dissolved into a flashback of her previous life in the modern world. She stood at a crosswalk, impatient to get home and play games, lamenting her bad luck at hitting another red light. Her phone chimed with a notification from the Frisia development team. The message thanked players for their constant support and addressed the overwhelming number of messages requesting aid for Ophelia. The developers announced the release of Hidden Files in that day's update to address these requests. The memory sharpened as the past version of Ophelia, the gamer, read the secret instructions. Once a certain affection level was attained, the flowerbed in the game would change. By inputting hidden commands, a special window would appear, instructing the player to give sweets to the gardener's boy. Following this path would cause the Frisias to turn black. This secret route allowed the player to switch perspectives and play as Ophelia, effectively making the Villainess the protagonist and enabling her to romance the other characters. The notification warned that this message was exclusive to those who had petitioned for Ophelia's happiness and that a public announcement would follow later. Overwhelmed with joy, the gamer on the street cheered, ecstatic that her voice had been heard and that she finally had the chance to save Ophelia. The vision abruptly cut to static. Ophelia jolted back to the present moment in the garden, her body failing her as she collapsed toward the ground. Her vision blurred and darkened, the world around her dissolving into shadows. As consciousness slipped away, she reached out, her lips forming a single name, Prince Felix. Ophelia stood before Prince Felix in the hallway, her heart buoying with anticipation as she invited him to have lunch in the courtyard. Felix's expression softened, but before he could accept, a voice cut in, announcing that the teacher was calling for him. Felix turned, explaining that the meeting concerned the student representatives who would be singing. Just then, Lady Alicia materialized at his side, beaming with an energy that demanded attention. She exclaimed how excited she was to spend quality time with him, effectively staking her claim on his schedule. Ophelia retreated, forcing a polite smile as she told them not to mind her, her chest tightening as she watched them depart. Solitude defined her lunch hour. Ophelia sat on a secluded wooden bench beneath the shade of a large tree, opening her bento box. She ate mechanically, the food tasting bland in the absence of company. She resigned herself to the reality that Prince Felix was a busy man, yet her mind wandered to the precariousness of her position. She reaffirmed her resolve not to annul the engagement, reflecting on the support system she had built since her reincarnation. She had genuinely wanted to get along with the heroine, but Alicia's recent aggression tested that desire. A heavy sigh escaped her lips as she thought of the girl's sheer audacity, her appetite vanishing completely as the weight of the reverse harem route loomed over her. Footsteps approached, breaking her reverie. She looked up to find Prince Felix standing there, breathless and apologetic. He expressed regret for his inability to have lunch with her earlier. Ophelia waved off his apology, assuring him she understood his busyness, but Felix pressed on, hoping to make it up to her. He sat beside her, the wood creaking slightly under his weight, and asked if she would like to go somewhere together. Ophelia's mood lifted instantly. She beamed, interpreting the invitation as a date. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Alicia sat basking in the memory of her own lunch with the prince. She recalled how he had dined with her, interpreting his politeness as intimate interest. She replayed his words, how he called her special, and convinced herself that their relationship was deepening. Emboldened by this delusion, she later approached Felix in the classroom, carrying a cup of lemon jelly she had grabbed for dessert. She called out to him, lamenting that they had run out of time earlier, but as she neared his desk, her foot caught on the leg of a table. She lurched forward, the jelly flying from her hands as she crashed to the floor with a theatrical shriek. Silence descended upon the classroom. Alicia pushed herself up, her face twisting into a mask of victimhood as she turned on Ophelia. She accused the noblewoman of tripping her, her voice shrill with indignation. Ophelia stared in bewilderment, denying the accusation, pointing out that she had done nothing. Alicia refused to back down, insisting Ophelia had kicked the desk leg to trip her. The commotion drew the eyes of the entire class, whispers erupting like wildfire. A student intervened to call the custodians, dispersing the crowd and ending the scene. In the aftermath, Ophelia analyzed Alicia's erratic behavior. She realized Alicia wasn't merely trying to befriend peers, she was actively manufacturing enemies. Ophelia deduced that Alicia's goal was to become queen via the reverse harem route, necessitating connections with powerful nobles, yet she antagonized them instead. The realization solidified Ophelia's resolve. If Alicia played the heroine, Ophelia would play the villainess, but on her own terms. She recalled the hidden files from her past life, specifically the secret route involving the gardener. Determined to seize her own happy ending, Ophelia marched to the garden behind the school. She spotted a figure on a ladder tending to the roses, not the old man from the game stills, but a young boy in a cap and suspenders. She called out to him, introducing herself. The boy, Io, scrambled down, startled by the presence of a noble. He introduced himself as the gardener's apprentice, explaining that his grandfather had hurt his back. Ophelia observed the vibrant red roses, praising their deep color and the care he must have poured into them. Io flushed at the compliment, admitting that no noble had ever listened to his ramblings before. Seeing an opening, Ophelia produced a box of snacks, inviting the lonely boy to a tea party right there in the garden, determined to forge a new path for herself. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows over the garden table where Ophelia sat across from Io. She sipped the chamomile tea he had prepared, the warmth spreading through her chest as she complimented the flavor, noting its origin from his family's territory. She watched the young boy enjoy the snacks she provided, a pang of guilt tightening her chest. She observed his innocent enthusiasm and compared it to the sensation of having a younger brother, yet the thought curdled with the knowledge that she was technically exploiting him to unlock the villainous route. She pushed the guilt aside, reaffirming her resolve to secure a future where she could live happily, even if it meant treating reality like the game it once was. The conversation shifted to the topic of the freesias planted behind the school. Io explained that the flowers in that specific area possessed unique properties, grown from special seeds his grandfather had painstakingly procured. He described how the color of the blooms remained mutable, capable of shifting suddenly from red to another hue depending on cultivation methods. Ophelia leaned forward, her interest piqued, and admitted she harbored a specific hope: to see black freesias. Io paused, admitting he had never heard of such a variety, but the mention of the color black sparked a different idea in his mind. He suggested that if she held an interest in black flowers, she might appreciate the black roses he tended to elsewhere. Intrigued by the prospect of such a rarity, Ophelia accepted his offer. Io led her away from the main garden toward a secluded building on the campus periphery, the training hall. As they approached, the majestic structure of the hall loomed in the background, but Ophelia's attention fixated on the flower bed before it. There, darker than the deepest night, grew the black roses. She gasped at their regal shade, marveling at the otherworldly quality they possessed. Io explained that they cultivated these blooms in this unpopulated area precisely because their ominous color made them unpopular with the ladies of the academy. He offered to cut some for her to decorate her room, eager to see his hard work appreciated. As Io stepped into the brush to harvest the stems, a commotion erupted from the direction of the training hall. A piercing scream of adoration cut through the air, followed by a chorus of female voices chanting Lord Alvin's name. Ophelia turned to see a crowd of female students pressing against the boundary of the training grounds, their eyes glued to the figure in the center. Lord Alvin moved with fluid precision, his sword cutting through the air as he practiced his forms. Sweat glistened on his skin, his focus absolute as he executed a strike that resonated with a sharp clang. The spectators swooned, whispering about his knightly lineage and how seeing him in his element felt like a dream come true. Io returned from the bushes, his arms laden with a bouquet of the dark flowers. He approached Ophelia, but the sudden noise of the crowd distracted him, causing him to ask innocently if someone had passed away, associating the black flowers and the wailing girls with the funeral. His question, though quiet, drifted to the ears of the nearby fangirls. The group turned, their expressions shifting from adoration to suspicion as the whisper of death rippled through them. They spotted Ophelia holding the black roses, and one girl stepped forward, her face twisting in distaste. She accused Ophelia of harboring ominous intent, declaring that black symbolized misfortune and calamity. Ophelia stood her ground, calmly asserting that black possessed its own beauty, but the atmosphere remained tense. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the training grounds. Lord Alvin approached the perimeter, his sword lowered. He ignored the throng of admirers and addressed Ophelia directly. He remarked that she shone so brightly that the roses seemed dull in comparison, asserting that the black blooms truly brought out her beauty. He turned his gaze to the crowd, delivering a charming wink as he proclaimed that women were beautiful regardless of the color they associated with. The sentiment instantly flipped the crowd's mood. The same girls who had just sneered at the roses now clamored for Alvin to bestow the flowers upon them, begging for his attention. Alvin's expression hardened into professional sternness. He reprimanded the group for disturbing his practice matches and ordered them to leave the grounds immediately. The girls scattered, their excitement dampened by the dismissal, though one lingered long enough to shoot a glare at Ophelia before departing. Ophelia watched them go, then turned back to Alvin, but he had already turned on his heel, heading straight back to his training without a backward glance. She noted the subtle hitch in his gait, his left foot dragged slightly across the pavement, a sign of injury he attempted to mask with a stoic stride. Ophelia realized she could not leave things as they were. She apologized to Io for cutting their time short and followed Alvin into the building. She found him in a quiet corridor, leaning against a wall as he grimaced in pain. He clutched his leg, the facade of the invincible knight crumbling in the solitude. He muttered to himself about the burning sensation, chiding his own stubbornness for keeping up a strong front as befitted the third son of a knightly family. Ophelia stepped out from the shadows, calling his name. Alvin jolted, straightening instantly to hide his pain, surprised to find her there. Ophelia approached him with a determined softness, thanking him for his assistance with the crowd earlier. Alvin brushed it off, attempting to maintain his composure, but Ophelia cut through his defenses. She stated plainly that she saw him dragging his foot and knew he was injured. Alvin tried to deny it, claiming he hadn't done anything, but Ophelia refused to ignore the wound. She knelt before him, producing a first aid kit she had seemingly materialized, and insisted on treating him. Resigned, Alvin allowed her to tend to him. He watched from above as she worked, her elegant fingers moving with gentle precision as she wrapped his ankle. He observed her focused expression, realizing that despite seeing her constantly with the crown prince, he had never truly known her. The rumors painted her as a flirt, but the woman before him displayed only courtesy and genuine care. He admitted to her that while he wished he could use healing magic, he lacked the affinity, making her physical treatment all the more valuable. Ophelia finished the bandage, securing it with a neat knot. She stood, advising him to have it looked at properly by a professional later. Alvin tested his weight on the foot, surprise registering on his face as he realized the pain had subsided. He looked at Ophelia with new eyes, confessing that he had heard rumors warning him to be careful of her flirtatious nature. He offered a sheepish smile, declaring that he now knew the rumors to be false. Ophelia smiled back, wishing him a speedy recovery before turning to leave. As she walked away, Alvin stretched his arms, noting with satisfaction that the throbbing had ceased entirely.